All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Joe Stewart here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. It is it is right at 8:05 in the AM, and it is Tuesday, September 17th. We have the pleasure and honor of having as our guest Mr. Travis Music, the president of the Golden Valley Electric Association. We also have physically present in the room. And I'll just remind everybody, we can get back to meeting in person. So if you ever want to come down, please do make the fresh coffee. We still get at North Pole Coffee Roasters for you, so we'll make you a good cup. But here in the room, we do have Mr. Jack Wilbur, director on the IGU board, as well as Mr. Watts, longtime local notable and friend of the task force. And so, yeah, just a couple of not even parliamentary, but perfunctory, just as a reminder, this is for you all's benefit. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, I do have actually the second computer screen going today. So we can monitor, I'm monitoring both the participant list and the chat box. So if you have a question, you can post it in the chat box. Although you can go ahead and raise your hand, or as always, you can simply take yourself off mute and fire away. This is for your benefit. All right. Well, without further ado, Mr. Million, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joel.
Sure.
So there are a few people that I have not met online and here in person, so wanted to give just a little opportunity to give a little bit of my background. So I've been kind of in the utility and power generation and distribution space for about 25 years now. Backgrounds in electrical engineering, started my career for a company called Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories, which builds these cool little blue boxes that protect your power system, generation units, and other things that way. So started there, got my foot in the door, just working in manufacturing as I was going to college, and then worked my way up when I left Schweitzer Engineering. I was working in hardware design and research and development at that point in time. Had a great opportunity in 2005 to move up to Alaska and took a job working for the HARP facility, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. At that time, it was a Air Force facility under a Navy contract and funded by DARPA. So it was, and we were a contract company working under that realm. So I got the opportunity to help build out the power generation facility, which was the 13 megawatt diesel power plant up there, and actually install and commissioned all of the high frequency transmitters on facility as well. So primarily was working on the generation and distribution side of the house, but also did a lot of the electronics as well. While I was working at the HARP facility, I saw an opportunity come up to serve the community and serve on the board of directors for the electric utility, the co-op down there, Copper Valley Electric. I served on that board for 3 years, 1 year as the vice chair and 2 years as the chair. And during that time, an opportunity came up where they were looking for a power generation manager, and was asked to consider resigning from the board of directors and come on as an employee. And at that point in time, I did just that. Oversaw the power generation side of the house at Copper Valley Electric for just a couple of years, and then moved into a newly created position, a chief operating officer position. So then I took on the engineering side of the house and the operations, the poles and wires and everything in between. Sat in that role for probably 6-7 years, and then got the opportunity to step in as their new CEO about 5 years ago, and served as the CEO for Copper Valley Electric for 4 years when an opportunity came up here to come on board as the chief operating officer at Golden Valley. Was in that role for about 9 months. John Burns had retired, and got the opportunity from the board of directors to serve now as the president and CEO for the last about 3 months. So that's kind of the whirlwind of my career and where it's landed me here in Fairbanks. Been in Fairbanks for about a year now, and family's absolutely enjoying the opportunity to be up here, and it's been a great transition for us. So,
because you said you've been living out in Copper Center.
Yes, so new to Fairbanks, but not new to Alaska. Spent 18 years in the Copper Center, Glen Allen area. So that's kind of the background on me.
Well, I'll go ahead and get started with comments. As we discussed before we got started here, it has been a while since we had someone at the top spot over at our electric co-op who actually was knew the business. Well, they've all known the business, but we've had a couple lawyers for the last couple of years rather than someone who really knew the operations or had come up through those ranks. So it is neat, I think.
So with that, the one thing I did want to spend a little time on, because as you said, Jomo, in the news, we just had a press release, I think last week, had kind of a little media day when we had the United States Department of Agriculture in town for our Alaska Power Association statewide annual meeting that we were hosting in Fairbanks last week. And during that time, we were discussing a few of the grant programs that Golden Valley was fortunate to receive, grants and loan programs through the USDA. But what I did want to do is kind of peel back the onion a little bit and kind of walk through a number of different grant programs or loan opportunities that the Golden Valley was successful in either receiving on our own or in partnership with other electric co-ops in the state that we were able to participate in and be awarded. And as I was making this list yesterday, it was kind of mind-boggling, going, holy cow, we have been very successful from that standpoint. And the way I looked at it, and I know our staff did as well, is this money was going to go out the door no matter what from the federal government, no matter what your thoughts are on the programs of, hey, it's our taxpayer money, is this the best use? Well, it's going out the door no matter what. So let's try to bring some of that home.
The phrase I use with our legislators in the Interior Delegation is the slop is going in the trough. The only question is, do you dip your ladle?
Absolutely. So kind of starting with the bigger ones, and this one's a little bit older notice, but just before legislative session kicked off in January, the state was awarded what we call GRIP, which the state had applied because the state was the only eligible entity to apply, but it was with the partnership of all the electric co-ops along the Railbelt. And as a reminder, the Railbelt is Homer up into Anchorage, Palmer, Wasilla, and then up into Fairbanks. So that stretch along basically the Parks Highway and down toward Homer is considered the Railbelt. So we had all put in kind of a joint application through the Alaska Energy Authority for transmission upgrades, looking to get power off of the Kenai Peninsula over into the Anchorage Bowl and then eventually up into Fairbanks. So we were awarded the first round at $206.5 million, which was the I think still at this time the fifth largest award federally that was given out as part of this program. But that only took care of half of what we're looking for. So that was a high voltage DC submarine cable from the Kenai Peninsula over into the Anchorage Bowl area.
So that's the royal we.
Yes.
As in we state of Alaska.
Yeah, state of Alaska
Railbelt
on that one.
utilities.
Yes. Does the converter stations to go from your DC to AC and vice versa. And then also looking at some battery energy storage for, in particular, the Anchorage Bowl and in Fairbanks. So that award was $206.5 million with a matching grant of the same amount that we've been as the electric utilities and Alaska Energy Authority working on the matching portion of that, which some would come from the utilities, some potentially from the state. We're working through that process right now through the budget process. There was enough money that was matched through the state to get the first year or so going. So that is full steam ahead right now. We did also apply for the second round of funding, which would get the line from Anchorage to Healy, which would give a second redundant path the entire length of the rail belt. We were not successful in round 2 funding for that. What I did find out as well is every applicant that received round 1 funding, nobody received round 2 funding. So I think they're looking at this as how can they spread this money around. It's unsure at this point in time whether there will be a round 3 funding or not, but we are evaluating a couple different options that we could look at for whether we put in for the exact same thing again to get that line. If we look at some sort of state bonding option to build that second line, or if there's some sort of, there's another option of funding if it becomes available through this to upgrade our existing line from 138,000 volts to 230,000 volts, which would allow more energy to flow with less losses as well.
As opposed to installation of another line.
Yes, as opposed to adding a second line. It doesn't give you your redundancy, but it does it opens up the restrictions that they have on the capacity. Exactly.
How much do we have a ballpark estimate on that phase 2 up to Healy?
The phase 2 application, I believe, was right around 600 million all in. for that line, but in order to qualify, it's got to be what they call a newer technology, so high voltage DC. So if you built it AC, it would be cheaper than a DC line. So that's why we're looking at other options is, you know, if we can't get the grant funding, looking at a high voltage DC line, do we pivot, look at an AC line and try a different funding source?
So it's considerably more miles. We're talking for the extension from the extension to Anchor Bowl to Healy.
Absolutely.
Okay, because that is quite a jump in cost.
Yeah, where the jump from like the Kenai Peninsula to Anchorage was not far distance wise. It was 35 miles. But, but it's all the converter stations and everything that adds the price. And submarine cable is expensive for sure. So that was kind of a Railbelt wide. I'm going to keep on the Railbelt wide looks as well. So the other part is through the Department of Energy. Again, this was a grant that the electric co-ops couldn't qualify for directly, but the state of Alaska could. Basically, the money had to funnel through the state in order to go out to the utilities. So we partnered again with the Railbelt utilities on two different grants that we were awarded. The first was for $13.8 million. This was what we call a transmission snow load resiliency grant. So the line, again, from basically Anchorage to Healy, there's sections within that transmission line that is susceptible to snow loading that causes the lines to either sag really low, or when the snow releases causes them to bounce. And it causes trips on the transmission line. At the time of the year, you really don't want the trips on the transmission line. So we put in for and received a grant to address that issue. There was some design work that was done to redesign the insulators that hold the wire off of the structures to prevent this from happening going forward. So we put in for that, and that'll be
or at least keep it localized to one section as opposed to it.
Yes. And it'll keep it from, the other part is the way it was designed now, there's a few sections that are really long spans where that line can sag extremely low. And so it causes a potential safety concern if people are in the area. Luckily in these areas, there's really nobody in that area because it's just out in the middle of nowhere. But we wanted to address those items. So we did receive the grant, which was a 75% grant with a 25% match. And the match could include both cash match and labor. So you could use a percentage of labor, which we would use in-house labor for project management, engineering, design, things like that. So from the utility standpoint, there was very little monetary contribution that was needed for that particular grant. But again, almost $14 million to address an issue that's been plaguing us for decades. So finally an opportunity to go through and fix that. Then kind of shifting gears away from the statewide, announced a few weeks ago, Golden Valley received $100 million through the PACE program, which was through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Rural Utility Services Division in particular, for $100 million. What that was a loan, and the loan actually had a 60% loan forgiveness as part of that. So of the 100 million, 60 million would be forgiven. So now you've got 40 million remaining. And of that 40 million remaining, there was up to 50% investment tax credits that, with some new regulations that were changed a couple of years back, that allowed direct payment to nonprofit cooperatives. Because in the past, there was all these tax credits that were out on the street, but cooperatives could never qualify because we were tax exempt entities. So for-profit entities would take advantage of these tax breaks, and it worked great for them, but the co-ops never could receive any benefit from it. So with that change, it allowed us as a cooperative to qualify for these tax credits up to 50%. So of that $100 million, 60% loan forgiveness, up to 50% of direct pay tax credits. So very, very good benefit for that one. What we're looking at under that program is to install a 46 megawatt 2-hour battery energy storage system, or BESS system, similar to what we currently have on our system now, but different. And the reason why I say it's similar but different, more or less same size from a megawatt standpoint, but lot longer duration. Our current battery, when it was originally installed, was a 46 megawatt, 15-minute battery. A lot has changed in the technology over the last 20 years that allows a lot longer duration. What we're looking at is probably keeping the existing battery running just as it is for outage support and what we call spinning reserve, allowing instead of having to run a fossil fuel generating unit just in idle, basically, in case something happens with the system, we can use our battery for that. So we would remain to use the battery that we currently have for the outage support. The new battery would be used for helping to regulate non-dispatchable energy resources. For example, with this PACE program, as we're looking to do a purchase power agreement for a 16 megawatt solar array down in the Nenana area. So an independent power producer would build this array. We would go into a contract for a set price, and any energy it produces, we would buy for that set known price. They would be responsible for all the operation and maintenance. We would just receive the energy from them. So it works out pretty well that way. So that battery would more or less regulate. So when the sun's up and it's running well, it would charge the battery. When the sun starts going down, instead of having to fire up a diesel generator or ramp our coal plants or anything like that, the battery would then push energy into the system and make up that difference for when the clouds come over the sun or the sun starts going down for the day. So big savings that way, keeps our other generating units from having to go up and down all the time. The battery can do that as there's any changes on the system that way.
We're using a generation that needs expensive distillates
Exactly.
to ramp up and ramp down.
The other part of that one is some substation upgrades for integrating the battery, and then also the integration of this solar project. So that would be part of that $100 million program.
What's the size of the solar project you all have now, the demonstration one?
So ours is only a half a megawatt right now.
So
Put that in perspective,
it's
a
a
half a
scale.
megawatt, that's the scale a half a megawatt takes up. So 16 megawatts would be 32 times bigger, more or less. The panels from when that was installed in 2018 compared to the panels today with bifacial panels and some other options could take up less space and produce more power on less space, but it's ballpark about the same size that way. So then what was announced just last week, or maybe it was the week before, was another USDA program called New Era. And this particular one was specific for electric co-ops. This program was oversubscribed like no other. I believe there was about $7.1 billion that was available in this program. Last year, when USDA came up to Alaska and talked to the electric co-ops, they said they were concerned that there would not be enough interest to even spend the money, and there would be multiple rounds of funding in order to do so. They were wrong, and
Really haven't been a lot.
yeah, it was oversubscribed nationwide.
Yes.
It was oversubscribed nationwide by about 5 times. So of the 7.1 billion that was available, you know, it was the ballpark of about 30 billion of ask that was there. So one round, all the funding was gone. They just announced the top 13 awardees 2 weeks ago back in Illinois. And we were one of the 13 top awardees with that. So this program was for $206 million, which there's actually more benefit than the 206 because of how the calculation goes into, you know, if you're asking for a grant, it may be a $1-for-$1, but if you're asking for a loan, it may only be a 40% take on the number that's in that 206. It was a really weird formula that took quite some time to figure out the right way to put in our application and get that dollar amount dialed in properly. But with this, it's a combination of grants, loans, loan for refinancing for stranded assets, and these loans that we applied for are all at 0% interest. So very low, no interest loans.
If you don't mind us wondering there for a moment, so that's what that caught my eye in the story in the news, again, stranded asset. And that's what they named was Healy 2.
Yeah, so put this in perspective, this loan or this,
Which was bonded originally.
yes, I believe so. I'm not 100% sure how the financing went with Healy 2 back then. I wasn't here, so I rely on my CFO to fill in all that information. But yeah, so when we put the application in, it was nearly a year ago when the initial LOI and application, the LOI went in for this program. So at that time, to kind of step back, the strategic generation plan had set to close down Healy 2 at the end of 2024. So that was the direction we were going with this application was, okay, how do we maximize the benefits from this program if we're closing down Healy 2? In February of
Because I can burn my house to the ground, but
Mhm.
Wells Fargo's still gonna want their mortgage payment.
Exactly. So in February of 24, the board modified the strategic generation plan as the original plan was to bring in Cook Inlet natural gas energy generated in Anchorage up the intertie to Fairbanks to replace Healy, because that's what was always used prior to Healy coming online. When the Cook Inlet started seeing deliverability issues, that was no longer an option to replace Healy 2. So with the modification of the strategic generation plan, the closure of Healy 2 was delayed until such time that baseload generation that was more economical and more reliable than Healy was in place in order to shut down Healy 2. So the application went in before the change in the strategic generation plan, but that's one of the things within this is it's ideally a carbon reduction program is what the new era program is. So right now we're looking at, yes, when we were modeling the closure of Healy 2 was what we were evaluating, but we're also looking at what other options are out there right now for maintaining and meeting that carbon reduction goal, but needing that baseload generation. And so we're still going through that. We're in the negotiation phase with the USDA. Actually, it hasn't even started yet. They did the announcement first, and then all the paperwork will follow at some point in time afterwards. But that is definitely something we're evaluating. If we find that baseload generation, to be able to refinance the debt on Healy 2 at 0% interest could be a big benefit to our membership. So that is definitely on the table and what we're looking at going forward. With this program, so that's one component of it. Another is
Actually, if you don't mind,
yeah,
sorry,
absolutely.
need to push, but so say that one more time. Again, we have Healy 2. Debt was taken out for Healy 2. The debt is there.
Yes.
There's a cost to the money.
Yep.
Right. What you said was we need something to replace it so that then we could refinance it at 0 interest. So that was correct.
Yes. So
okay.
you would have to have, the thing is we'd need that baseload generation, particularly when it's 50 below in Fairbanks. We need something that we can push the start button and it's going to be running. Wind projects are great, but most of them have a temperature cutoff. At like our Eva Creek project, I think it's at 23 below 0. It goes into basically a survival mode, and so it quits spinning. It keeps everything warm. It keeps it from freezing up. But also typically in the interior is when it gets to 40 and 50 below, the wind's not blowing. It's very dense, very calm at that point in time. So you can't necessarily rely on wind generation for that baseload generation in the winter time. And so that's the big thing we're looking at is, okay, we have to have something that's reliable and cost effective in order to replace Healy. And, as everybody is aware, Healy has issues with reliability, and obviously when you have reliability issues and things break, that means the costs are going to go up. And so that's what we're trying to prevent going forward is that on again, off again.
You can essentially move forward with closing Healy 2, but now you can put plans in place to replace it with something with 0%. Oh my gosh, financing.
Well, actually, the replacement of whatever for Healy 2 is not part of this.
Okay, that was my mistake.
It's just taking the current debt, which we have right now about $120 million in debt with some percentage rate on it for Healy right now. So what we would be able to do is take that 120 million and roll that into a 0% interest.
Which again would be just if that's all it is. Or at least we're not paying money on money.
Exactly.
Exactly. Is a benefit.
So also with that program is and you'll hear battery a lot.
Oh, and by the way, everybody, you're being really quiet. If you have questions, I'll just remind now that we're about 30 minutes in, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, of course, you can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat. I see Dr. Davies just has, But you could also just take yourself off mute and fire away.
And I guess let everyone know there's no slides.
And there's no slides. Yeah, we're just screen sharing GVEA's website.
So you're gonna hear a lot okay, so Delta Wind operated when it was cold last winter and others. So our Eva Creek project, during that cold snap, what we'll call it the 10 days of cold snap we had, the Eva Creek project was shut down, basically did not operate for about 9 of those days. If you took it from an overall, there'd be little spits and spurts throughout that it operated, but for the most part, it didn't. From the data I saw, yes, Delta did produce, but it definitely was reduced mostly because the wind profiles backed off considerably during that time as well. So, you know, the interior when it's 50 below, it's difficult.
So physics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about the lithium ion BESS system for PACE. New Era also has another battery component to it, another 46 megawatt. And we're debating whether it would be a 2-hour or 4-hour battery for that particular project, again, for regulation of non-dispatchable resources. In this case would be wind. So part of that carbon reduction is, you know,
Also lithium ion?
also lithium ion.
Okay.
And the reason for the lithium ion is the fast response time. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So our battery right now can respond fast, but it's really, really slow to charge back up. Lithium ion can discharge and charge much more rapidly. So as wind, you know, comes up and down, however the wind is changing, then that battery can respond, you know, instantaneously, essentially. So with that one, we're also looking at adding 36 miles of 138,000 volt transmission line, which essentially would start from northeast of Fairbanks, go around the north part of Fairbanks to Fort Knox substation, and then wrap down to our North Pole power plant. What that does is give a redundant loop for redundancy and capacity flow, and allows us to bring on potentially large wind projects in our system as well. That is a key component through all of our analysis we have done for stability of the system that has to be in place. So adding the transmission line allows us to then bring on some of these renewable resources onto the system.
And again, at a new location.
Yes, at a new location. This is also add 2 new transmission substations as part of that loop. And then we're looking at, you know, up to 150 megawatts of wind onto the system. But with that, part of it is we're evaluating right now how much of that wind we could actually take in within Golden Valley's system if we were isolated, if the transmission line went down without causing stability issues. So we're on the tail end of finishing that up internally right now. We got some phenomenal engineers on staff doing that work for us, and evaluating how much could we take on and then how much could we potentially take from that project, because as you build projects bigger, economy of scale drives the price down. So can we take some of that energy, build it out bigger, and sell energy south to Anchorage and Palmer and Los Angeles?
So we're back to the transition line upgrade.
Yeah, but potentially, yes. And so that's why all this kind of plays together very well. If you get transmission, unrestrained transmission, you can push more power, you can build a project possibly bigger. The bigger the project, the lower the cost, essentially.
Per widget.
Yes, exactly. So we're looking at that. There's 2 different projects that we've talked about openly that we're evaluating. There's the one that's been talked about many times at Shovel Creek up on Murphy Dome. And there's another project down in the Delta area that we're looking at as well to possibly bring wind onto our system. So we're working through both of those right now. We're a lot of technical analysis is still going on to finish those up, but then we will go into negotiating power purchase agreements for whatever size makes sense for Golden Valley system. So that was the most recent one that was announced just last week. So again, that was $206 million for that program.
Travis?
Yes, sir.
John Davies here. So are those, the 2 wind projects that you just mentioned, are they mutually exclusive?
They're definitely 2 different entities that would be building and operating and maintaining those.
But I mean, from GVEA's point of view, if you do one, are you not going to do the other, or and vice versa? Or another way to phrase it is, could you imagine doing both at the same time?
Yeah, and that's what we're evaluating right now is because I can see some scenarios where we do both, for sure. So we're looking at, you know, what makes the most amount of sense, one or the other or both. And we're, at this point in time, we're kind of looking at both being probably the best option.
So what's the other one? I know Shovel Creek.
Delta wind. There's one down in Delta. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, totally opposite ends of the system. Yeah, so we have identified, especially down in Delta, again, there are some limitations of how much power we could transfer from that area back into Fairbanks. But that transmission line I was talking about earlier within our system, within this new era funding is kind of that Achilles heel. Once you get that in, that opens up for a lot more energy transfer throughout the entire system.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Yep, great question. So going from USDA back now to the Department of Energy, back to the resiliency grants, again, filtered through the Alaska Energy Authority, but this was a Golden Valley specific. We had applied for and received almost $12 million for transmission power line resiliency upgrades. And this is within our, what we call our 69 kV, so a little bit lower voltage transmission that we have running throughout our system, primarily within Fairbanks, going down toward North Pole and down toward Delta that way, is all our 69 line. There's a lot of our 69 lines will have the transmission built on the top, and then down the pole a little bit further, we've got our distribution system. So less poles, so you can use half as many poles and get the energy moving on both the distribution side and the transmission side. There's a few spots of those that those lines were designed a little closer than what we would like, especially when you get snow load and you could have those lines slap into each other, causing faults and issues that way. So we put in for doing a number of updates and upgrades on our 69 line. We'd rehabilitate 41 miles of that line. We'd reconductor 35 miles of that line, and we'd relocate 1 mile of that line that's, I believe, through kind of a bad area with swampy conditions and things like that. So we did receive that. This is all work that we were going to be doing no matter what, but a grant opportunity came up. So essentially saves our membership the better part of $12 million over the next 5 years on the work we were going to do anyhow. There is another round potentially coming up through this funding that we're going to be putting in for again on this. This particular grid resiliency grant only pertains to transmission lines over 69,000 volts. So really, there's only a handful of utilities in the state that qualify for this, which would be all the Railbelt utilities. There's a couple of utilities in Southeast, and Copper Valley Electric are the only utilities I'm aware of that have transmission lines higher than 69,000 volts. So for us to be able to get some of this grant money, it's looking pretty good again for the next round. So we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. Then about a year ago, or not quite a year ago, I guess about 9 months ago, it was announced that through the Department of Energy again, through their Office of Clean Energy Demonstration Projects, Golden Valley in partnership with Westinghouse received a grant for $50 million to go through a FEED study for long duration energy storage.
That's what I was wondering when
Yep.
I asked about the extra battery.
So you could kind of think of it as a battery, but I think of it more as a heat pump. Because it's not, it doesn't have any, it's not lithium ion, it's none of the battery chemicals. It is literally,
It's not chemical storage.
yep, it's hot fluid. It's mineral oil being stored in a vat that is filled with concrete spheres. And those concrete spheres will heat up like rockwood and retain heat for a very long period of time. So
It's a masonry heater for electric.
exactly. And so you have a turbine that, you got excess wind on the system, it's spinning the turbine. Instead of it being a generator, it's then kind of like an alternator. It charges up the system, heats up this mineral oil, it stays in this vat. When the wind dies down, and this is where it works so well with lithium ion, they marry together beautifully. So the lithium ion will respond immediately when the wind starts dying down. And as it's monitoring the wind, if the wind is not coming back up, over a period of time, then it would transition from your lithium ion battery to the long duration. It would start putting power out. Then at that point in time, the lithium ion would shut down and could start charging back up again eventually. And you'd start discharging from your long duration energy storage. That heat would then run through that turbine unit, which would now be a generator, putting up to 50 megawatts of electricity out onto the system for up to 24 hours. So it's just constantly discharging at 50 megawatts. When the wind picks back up again, then it could cycle back and recharge itself. That heat goes through the turbine. Turbine takes the energy from that heat, and then it goes, there's another pool that then freezes. And so it's super chilling it, freezing it into cold. And then when it starts energizing back up, it takes that energy from that cold bath, thaws it out, runs it back through the cycle and heats up that fluid again. So much like a heat pump, just moving energy from one to the other.
I would just remind everyone, we had a presentation from Westinghouse.
Oh, okay.
We did. I will try to look and identify it lickety split here on my phone. But yeah, if anyone would like to know more about that particular project, again, this was a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
But I'll remind everybody of that. Cool beans. Otherwise, again, you can just search on the FEDC webpage or FEDC YouTube page because it is there. Thanks.
Yeah, so that one, we're right now in the middle of the FEED study, the front end engineering design study. Once we get through that phase, which was a 12 to 18 month period of time that we're going through that, we will basically be at a 30% engineering design and have good evaluation whether it will work and marry with our system well, and then what the ultimate price would be on a per kilowatt hour basis. So then it gives us an opportunity to take a look back and say, okay, is this a benefit for us or not? And we have an off ramp. If it doesn't work for us, you know, we're out the small match that we had for the FEED study. But if it does work, we can continue to move forward with that.
The joy of the word study.
Yes, exactly. So that's a pretty big one. In fact, Westinghouse and company are all here on site this week. Actually looking at the facilities down in Healy where we look to locate the project and taking a look at it.
February 17th, 2023. I repeat, if you would like to know a little bit more about the long duration thermal storage, February 17th, 2023 on the FEDC YouTube page.
All right, and I promise the last grant. So like I said,
No, you keep them coming,
yeah.
baby.
As I said, we were.
If we go over 2 hours on grants you receive, you get a lot of thrilled co-op members.
Yes.
Again, I would invite everyone, anyone who has any questions or comments, again, you can please take yourself off mute. I do see that Brittany Smart had a question on DSIP, but again, we go ahead and continue. And, okay.
Yeah, which, thank you, Brittany. That's one I did not have on my list is the DSIP grants. So the last one I have on my list here through the Department of Energy, again, there's a program through the Program Advanced Cybersecurity Technology, which was not a grant, it was a prize. I think there was like 3,500 utilities could apply for this, qualified to apply for this. There was kind of two different pots. One was for kind of utilities that needed help with cybersecurity, that maybe smaller utilities that just don't have the staff or the know-how to handle that. And the other was more the large utilities in particular that serve military bases. So we qualified under that with our military presence that we have. Under phase 1 of 3 phases, we were awarded $50,000 cash to be used for whatever you needed on this, and 120 hours of technical support through DOE, DOD, State Department, and other entities that are involved with this program.
Because 50,000 isn't a whole lot.
It's not a whole lot, and that's where kind of the neat thing about the program was too.
With the technical support.
Yeah, they only awarded to 55 utilities under this program. Then phase 2, they're going to award to 35. Of that 35, you had to be in that first phase of the 55. They're going to basically drop 20 of the utilities and award the next phase to only 35 of that 55 group. What they did is they had asked that to see how serious the awardees were with this. They had a briefing back in Washington, D.C. In July, and they said, your CEOs need to come out for this. Otherwise, your cybersecurity experts cannot attend. So they were gauging kind of how serious people were. So myself and our cybersecurity specialist went back to that briefing. And what they pretty much said at that briefing was, okay, now we know you guys are serious. What we said was going to be 50,000 for the next phase is going to be substantially more. And then phase 3 could be even larger. So thank you for taking this serious, and we will continue to communicate with you. So we're waiting for phase 2 is supposed to open up, I think, in November for applications on that, which obviously we'll be applying for, and then we'll see where that takes us. So
Cause it's legit.
it is very legit,
I
and
mean, I've heard some of the stories about, some of the cyber vulnerabilities and how folks have, exploited them
yes,
on other utility. I don't remember if it was electric per se, but I remember what sort of a utility where
yeah,
someone had
there's,
gotten it and monkeyed with the system, the
Yep.
water system.
there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that there's actually someone within, talking cyber with your energy and all of that, that they actually do kind of a class. They'll come to your community and get all of your utility providers together
Mhm.
and kind of do like essentially a tabletop, if you will, to test you and your utility and your cyber
Yeah,
capabilities and what that looks like and how protected or safe you are from outward threats.
yep. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities that way, and we lean on them quite a bit. Our cyber team is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so they have a number of different outside entities that are trying to penetrate our system and find out where our holes are so we can correct them before the bad actors find them.
Hezbollah's pagers just blew up apparently. I saw that this
Oh,
morning.
really? So those are the grants that I had. Again, Brittany mentioned the DSIP, so there's a couple different grants, and Brittany, please jump in if I forget a few of them, because I'm going right off of memory here, which is never a good thing. So one of them we're working with is looking at some upgrades to both the Eielson Air Force Base substation, adding a secondary substation and additional transmission lines to feed Eielson. That's being evaluated and designed right now. We're also working with Wainwright with a similar type of thing to bring in additional redundancy for transmission feeds into their system, including another potential substation there as well, just to give them the additional redundancy they're looking for, and those are funded through some of the DSIP grant opportunities.
I'm trying to remember what DSIP stands for.
Oh,
Where do you go? Yes.
Defense Community Infrastructure Program.
There
thank
she
you,
is.
Brittany. And another one we're working on right now is a line extension going down to the Black Rapids Training Center, which is being worked on right now to do that, to serve that load down there as well. So that one's a pretty big undertaking. I want to say that one is north of $15 million for that extension. Primarily overhead, one section being underground with kind of near the Black Rapids Lodge down in that area, because there's some airstrips and some other things that required us to go underground in that section. So that's in the works right now as well. So Brittany, did that touch the three that I'm remembering correctly?
Yeah, and I'll follow up with you separately in the email, but I also know, the DSIP timeline is really, really tight. Projects, in order to get approved, need to be shovel ready, and you have 5 years to expend the funds. I know Mr. Pat O'Brien just recently met with you. He was here for the Alaska Defense Forum. Could you get us a status update on that Black Rapids project and maybe where we're at with it? And yeah, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, so Black Rapids, we're working through the final design of that. We've been working on the permitting part of it, which has been a bit of a stumbling block, just trying to permit through the lands when you got multiple jurisdictions that are going on. That has taken some time, but we're working through the permitting process right now. Essentially, the project will be completed by I think it's third quarter of 2027 is where our drop dead date has to be completed to spend the funding and get that taken care of. So we're on track right now to do that. We're getting the process after we get the easements all lined up and finished up, which should be coming real soon. Then we provide all that information over to DOD, and then we'll get their final blessing. And then at that point in time, we can ink the final contracts and start purchasing materials and get things going. So it's going to be, as Brittany said, there's a very tight timeline to get the work completed. So it'll be turn around and get the materials running right away and have the contractors lined up so that they can start mowing the right of ways and getting whatever we can in the ground immediately, if not sooner. So, third quarter of 2027 is the end date for that one. Yep.
So are you looking at mowing and shovel work starting like this spring, or are you still trying to get some work done this fall before the ground freezes up, or how quickly are you looking at moving that one forward?
Due to the
I know as soon
easements
as possible,
taken,
but
yeah, due to the easements taking longer than we had hoped for, we're not gonna be able to get much of anything done this year, so we're shooting for clearing the right of way and everything starting next spring.
great, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wilbur.
Yeah, two questions on that. Why is it felt to be important to have power to the Black Rapids station? And then two, are there other potential power users along the way that will be added, that could be added?
Yeah, on the first one, I wasn't here when all those discussions took place. I kind of came on as that was in the mix, but I would assume that Black Rapids had came to us trying to figure out a way to bring power to them, and it could be a number of different things. It could be that you know, they've got an aging fleet that they're trying to retire, or
Well, over time, Fort Greeley has just been producing less,
yeah.
of its own power.
Yeah, in regards to the second part, I can answer that some. So yeah, Alyeska, I think it's Pump Station 9 is down in that area, has reached out to us about potentially extending out to them. I think there's a Black Rapids Lodge down in that area potentially that we could connect to, and I can tell you that based on historic work that I've done with Alyeska in my previous role at Copper Valley Electric, they've got a number of cathodic protection stations along the pipeline that they are aggressively trying to get off of self-generation for those, and if there's utilities available to do so. I did a project down there with them through Thompson Pass where we connected up 9 cathodic protection stations and they shut down their self-generation. So I could see that happening along that corridor as well.
But the power consumers would be open to any power
Oh, yeah.
consumer along the way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'd all be distribution voltage going down there, so, you know, if there's cabins or houses or anything like that that's interested, it's the right voltage to, just like we have in town.
Well, and the Black Rapids was more, my understanding, for the training
Mhm.
facility than anything.
Yeah,
that
that's,
Fort Greeley
that's, I knew that, yeah.
So yeah, so the training facility runs off diesel generators, and so they were trying to build energy resiliency, but also to stabilize prices. So with the cost of fuel, they were having it was just uncertain what their energy costs to run training exercises would be. So the idea to build in resiliency and connect to the grid was the impetus for putting it forward. And I think they're planning on keeping some of their aging diesel generators, but they're looking to have it as more of a backup capacity rather than the primary source of energy during those training exercises.
All right, everybody. Well, we've covered a lot of territory. And partially because you all have received a lot of support. Well done.
Yes.
You've reached out for and have achieved a lot of support. So I appreciate that. All co-op members will. I would open it up here at the end. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes. Mr. Wilbur?
So another thing that I've heard about with GVEA is a partnership between GVEA and FEDC.
And that's why I had the screen share.
Yep, perfect.
So I'll.
And so where does that partnership fit in this, and what is the status of that? I believe it's a loan.
Yes.
Low interest loan partnership type thing, and what is the status of that?
So that we are actually open right now for applications. The application period is open until Monday, September 30th. So we are open and live right now for the application process for that loan program.
Okay, so a little bit of background. And honestly, my craft, this is why I had the GVEA website just kind of loitering, because I knew we were going to switch to this. 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, our local GVEA co-op, in partnership with the USDA, received some funds that they could make very low interest loans available for economic development projects in a community. Those funds at the time were loaned to the co-op market, helped get it established.
And now those funds over 10 years have been returned. And so we're in a position to relet those funds. Under their agreement with GVEA's agreement with USDA, they were to have an economic development partner, that's FEDC. And so we are in partnership. There's going to be a total of about $350,000 worth of funds available, again, for eligible projects. The application, this is the application portal on FEDC's website. You'll see it's under community. It's the last one. It's here, Economic Growth Fund.
Under GVEA.
As you begin to scroll down, you'll see there's the application. There's lots of links for additional information. What are eligible projects? What are ineligible uses? Funding limits, interest rates and fees. Okay, but there are lots of information regarding the money itself and a link to produce and submit your application. FEDC is essentially acting as intake of those applications. We're going to, in partnership, we'll be helping to vet those submissions, and it will be the GVEA board, as it was last time, that will make the ultimate determination as to what funds get loaned and under what terms, and then FEDC will act as essentially a loan administrator. Okay, so again, we're getting the word out. This is going live at Budokai. It's right here on the GVEA website. And so if you, well, just go ahead and spread the word. There are a number of entities around the community doing a number of great things or having dreams of doing things here in our community that might qualify for a portion of these funds. It's not a huge lot of money, but again, it was very helpful in starting our local co-op market downtown and could help move some other projects forward.
This is on the GVEA website, not the FEDC website.
Yes, sir. We were trying to keep it consolidated. Yeah, I see something in the chat. Has there been any movement towards providing metering capacity for IGU from GVEA's AMI communication system? Well, that's an inside baseball. Thank you, Gary Newman.
And I've read something about that it was being evaluated some time ago, but I don't know anything more than that at this point in time.
I love when my directors lob out some inside baseball questions at me in public settings. Okay. All right. Well, everybody. Well, sir, Mr. Millian, it has been a true pleasure. I read with interest when you got the top spot. So it's nice to actually officially meet you, particularly here at the task force. We always this is a great way to help try to get people informed as to things that are relative to our electrical co-op and just our community generally. And so we really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for reaching out, and I'm glad we could make this happen.
And so we'll be circling back around. Again, I do have particular interest in that long-term energy storage.
Yeah.
It's neat, cutting edge. One of the upsides of living in Fairbanks is we do often have folks coming through who want to go ahead and test innovative and cutting edge technologies. We just had the Alaska Defense Forum. One of the big conversations there was relative to the micro reactor proposal demonstration project out of Eielson Air Force Base. We have our ASEP that's doing a lot of great work, and our university and UA research doing a lot of great work generally. So it's much appreciated. Again, we understand that part of it is just the fact that we are remote under a very high cost regime. So it helps make things economic that wouldn't be otherwise, but still things that can bring marginal benefits when we do have such high electric utility rates and such high demand.
Yes.
They can be very impactful. So we appreciate it. Jack, anything final from you?
No.
So good to see you this morning, sir. Mr. Watts, anything?
Yeah, I've had a question about purchasing power from independent producers.
Mhm.
What do you do to ensure reliability of that power? I mean, is this a contractual thing, or do you vet the organization before you enter an agreement, or?
So all of the above.
Oh.
So you definitely would be vetting the organization ahead of time. We have them provide us with the wind data and wind regime information to come up with their numbers on what they are projecting for the project to produce. We would internally look at it and have a third party also look at that to say, okay, does this pass a sniff test? And then contractually, yes, you put in things within the contract that kind of hold the feet to the fire a little bit, to protect our membership. So, you know, you only pay for what they produce, and if they don't produce X amount that they guarantee that they're gonna produce, there's penalties associated with it, typically in a PPA contract that way. So yeah, both contractual plus also, vetting ahead of time.
Okay, I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I see Mr. Music. I see Ms. Baroff. You guys are unusually quiet. Solely, I don't know if we've ever gone through a meeting without a question from you, Rick.
With the.
Well, I get a double pop with the board, so.
Oh,
I'll
that's
let
right.
you
Yes,
talk.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
With the work with the microreactor at Eielson, what does that look like in regards to your guys' ability to be connected to that, to be able to offset any energy for Eielson particularly? Like, what does that look like for you guys in that partnership?
Yeah, so with the microreactor at Eielson is not enough to fully eliminate their need. So it's just a portion. My understanding from conversations I've had is that they cannot sell any power back to the utility or provide any power back to the utility under that program. So it wouldn't really benefit us as much. I think the bigger benefit would be the proving grounds and proving that technology does work well in Alaska, and then opens the door for other potential
Future opportunities in other locations.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, well, we have reached the top of the hour. All right, everybody. Again, I thank you so much for coming. I think we do have a presentation next week, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check. I know we do have one coming. I spoke to Mr. Dan Robinson. He's one of the big guys over down at the Department of Labor in their research division. With so much discussion in the news relative to our migration, I've been seeing him, and he'd been giving interviews, and so I was going to bring him in to talk generally about Department of Labor research, but also again about migration specifically. So if you have any questions relative to the Department of Labor's research, please do let me know, because I'll forward those along. All right, well, beyond that, guys, there's lots of other stuff in the news too. So we're going to be getting the task force going again in earnest. So keep your eyes peeled for your updates. And I will be sending the recap of this discussion later on this week. All right.
Okay,
well,
Jomo, I'm sneaking in with the ones that I told you in text I wouldn't do.
Okay.
They're not that scary. So, Mr. Million, this is my not really work-related question is, since you were in Glen Allen, did you ever interact with a teacher at the high school named Kirk Howard?
Yes, I did. I knew Kurt.
Yeah, he's my cousin. So, because the whole state's, yeah,
his wife used to work with me at Copper Valley as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. Anyway, Lisa's great. And
Yes.
yeah, and as a just got it last week, recipient of one of the Good Sense awards. Thank you to you. Thank you to Mr. Soli. You know, thank you to the rest of the board. Smells like weather stripping, and we are excited to get a few more holes plugged in our building. So thank you.
Outstanding. Great
But
to
no,
hear.
it was like Glen Allen, and I was all like, oh, Kirk used to live in Glen Allen. So anyway, I'm gonna go back on mute so we can stay on topic.
No, we're good. Stop the recording.